This tutorial is for the provisional cast on using a crochet chain and a crochet hook and a needle. I'm going to show you two different sizes and two different cast-ons. One that I use with my Fisherman's rib cowl and the other that I use for the simple Elegance cowl. Let's start with the Fisherman's rib cowl. There are elements of both of these that are the same. There are two different ways you can do a provisional cast on using a crochet chain. One of them is to form the chain and then pick up the stitches. The other is to cast on your stitches over the top of a knitting needle. I like the second method better, and that's the method I'm going to demo in this particular tutorial. So you can start with a slip knot, and to form a slip knot you simply cross your yarn with a tail over the top of your working yarn. Then you reach your crochet hook through and pull your working yarn through, and you have your slip knot. Now we're just going to make a few chain stitches, which means with our crochet hook through our loop, we will grab the yarn with the hook and pull it through. Grab the yarn with the hook and pull it through our loop. And I'm going to do that a few times. The first method would then, you would just keep crocheting, and then you would very carefully, here's the top of our chain with the loops, then you turn it to the side and you would essentially go through these loops on the back and pick up. Now that's a little tricky sometimes to make sure you see exactly what part you're supposed to crochet into so that it'll unzip very nicely when you're done with your provisional cast on. This cast on, you take your knitting needle you have your yarn, working yarn, your knitting needle goes over the top of your working yarn, and then basically you're just putting your needle in the middle of your stitch that you're making. And so as you can see, we're basically putting the, let me bring our yarn to the back, and you can see that I've essentially just put my needle in the middle of there, and so I've already got that on the needle. Now move the yarn to the back, grab that, grab your working yarn with your hook, pull it through your loop, move your working yarn to the back, grab it, pull it through. So this is the first step in this cast on. I'm going to display this a little bit more. We're just going to work this until we have 15 stitches. So we have 4 so far, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15. Now I'm finished with how many stitches I'm going to cast on. I'm going to double check again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. So I have my 15 stitches here. Now just like I have this chain section on this side, I'm going to keep chaining over here. So just grab my yarn, pull it through the loop, grab my working yarn, pull it through the loop, grab my working yarn and pull it through the loop. I kind of overdo it a little bit. You don't have to do that many. There's not a certain number that you need to do. It's just however many you want. I'm going to clip my yarn. Now, I want to make sure I keep this loop free, because the thing that makes this provisional cast on so valuable is when I'm done, I can just unzip it. I'm going to put those back in, but that doesn't work very well if I lose this loop or it becomes knotted. If I lose this end loop. So holding this loop open, I'm going to get a stitch marker, locking stitch marker, and run it through so that I don't lose it. Now I also don't want this to come out, so I'm going to, and this is why I do it a little bit longer. So I also just do a little half hitch, just kind of pull that over the top. So it's just very loosely knotted, but it can be undone very easily, and then I have my loop. So I'll do that again. I lay this end over along the edge of my chain, and I just knot it around very, very, very loosely in a little half hitch, because I don't want that to get too tight. Okay, now I'm ready. Finish with my crochet hook, and now I'm ready to begin doing my pattern, whatever that is. This is my working yarn. I'm ready to just knit these stitches with my working yarn. Today we're going to be working with this lovely Rasta, because that's what it calls for in the pattern. And we just take our tail down here and we just start knitting. 1, 2, 13, 14, 15 stitches. So we have our 15 stitches here in our needle. We have this nice loose provisional cast on here. Got a nice high contrast between the provisional cast on yarn and my working yarn now, my project yarn. And I want to make sure I have a high contrast. You notice the weight is different. That doesn't particularly matter. You're doing it loosely enough, and it's nice to be able to see it. You do want to make sure that you choose a smooth, I have no idea if you can see that. Okay, you do want to make sure you choose a smooth yarn. So you want to choose a yarn that's very smooth. This one would not be a very good one. It's a little fuzzy. So something with a very high twist, something very smooth is good. Now my provisional cast on is complete. I'm ready to proceed with my pattern. Casting on over the needle and then knitting this first set of stitches is my provisional cast on, because these stitches are now provisionally being held by this extra yarn. I am ready to begin my first row of this pattern, which is to knit all of the stitches. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the crochet chain tutorial for a different project, the simple Elegance cowl. Same beginning process. I just start my chain, for a few stitches just so I have a little bit of a base. Then I'm going to take my needle. In this case I'm going to have a much smaller needle. I'm going to use the needle that I'm going to be working with, and I'm going to put it over the top of my working yarn, stick my crochet hook across, and pull through. Same process. Put the yarn behind, reach through, make a loop, put the yarn behind, reach across, pull that working yarn through, put the working yarn behind, reach over the top with the crochet needle, with the crochet hook, pull that yarn through our existing loop, yarn behind, get the working yarn, pull it through your existing loop, yarn behind, grab the working yarn, pull it through the existing loop. I'm going to do this 40 times. So I'm at 38 stitches, 39, 40. Now I'm not going to keep going behind, and again I'm just going to chain a few. I like to leave it a little long because of the tie-off process that I do. So it's just a little easier. And I think this is why I do continental, by the way, is because when I crochet, I started crocheting and I'm just used to that. Alright, so I'm going to get my stitch marker, put it through this loop, and then take all of this and tie it just around once. Just loop it around in a half hitch really loosely. Now I know that's where I need to start unraveling. So now I'm going to knit 40, making sure I leave a long enough tail. Alright, so I've got my 40 stitches done. This provisional cast on is now complete. You can see because I used a thicker yarn, a bigger yarn, that it's a little puffier here, and this will kind of wrinkle as I get my project. It'll kind of end up going like this as my project goes, and that's fine, that's not a problem. You may want to use a thinner yarn. It might be your preference to use a little bit thinner yarn. I probably wouldn't have gone much thicker than this worsted weight smooth yarn with a fingering weight, just because I wouldn't want to distort the edge of my project too much. But I think this will work. I like having a nice difference between the two yarns. I like the color difference and the weight difference so that it's very easy and clear to see when I'm picking up these stitches and unraveling the waist yarn. Alright, that's our provisional cast on. The first part, the next section, will be picking up these stitches once we have our project complete and we're ready to do something else with the other side. Alright, let's talk about how to take off this provisional cast on. The piece is finished and now it's time for us to deal with the stitches on the other end. So if it wasn't that long ago for you, but I made a knot in this, so I'm just going to loosen it up very carefully. I put a knot in it and pull the stitch marker through, so now it's open. And I'm ready to take this stitch marker out take the stitch marker off. Now I'm going to just start unzipping this. In order to unzip this, I need to have a place to put the stitches. It doesn't matter precisely that I have the same size needle, so I just grabbed what was handy, which was this pair of Hiya Sharps. I'm using a size, this is a size 13. These are a size So these are size 9s. These are just what I had handy. But they will work just fine. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit easier if you have a little bit smaller size to pick up your stitches. Now, I'm going to carefully start pulling this chain out, going very slowly, and you notice my fingers are right down here where that yarn first dips in, so that I don't lose that stitch. Here it's going to come out. I'm going to keep my fingers on this. This is my first stitch that I'm picking up here. So we've got our first stitch on. Now you can see that I'm going to want to go down in here and catch this, and then I can just pull this out. Catch this next one. Then the next one. And I'm just working very, very, very slowly so that I don't lose too much of it. So where this loop comes through, that's my stitch that I want to pick up. Where this loop, if I pull it out, I could actually pull that whole stitch out through that loop. So, and I'm using these yarns to find these stitches a little easier as well. So I just keep on zipping, essentially unzipping this. And if I would have just unzipped it hastily, I would have had all of these stitches here, but they might have dropped down. And that's my last one right there. So have 15 stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 stitches on this needle, just like I have 15 stitches on this other end. Now, I could, at this point, I could graft these together, which is how this is going to end. I could pick up these stitches. I could take these stitches that I've knit and knit them forward, doing a different pattern or doing something else. There's all kinds of different things I could do. So the purpose of the provisional cast on is so that you can do different things with these live stitches. So now I have live stitches on both ends of my work. Okay, next we're going to pick up the provisional stitches for the simple Elegance cowl. All right, now we're ready to take out this provisional cast on from our simple Elegance cowl. And you can see how it's a little wavy here because I have this big heavier yarn with this lighter stitches. All right. Again, I know where to start because I tied my knot and I have the stitch marker. It's not really a whole knot, it's just a little half hitch. So I'm going to loosen this up, take that out, and now I have my stitch marker through my loop for my chain loop. And again, I'm going to pull this out, keeping a hold, keeping a pinch on the base, so that as I get to this loop, I know I'm ready to start collecting these stitches, these live stitches that I'm going to reveal onto my needle. So I've put my yarn in through my first stitch, and now I'm going to take it out. Put my needle into my next stitch, as we're looking at this right here. Right through here is my next stitch. Get my needle on, take that out. The next stitch, then I'm just going to repeat this for all 40 of these stitches. And yeah, the way I'm doing it right now is a little slow. I'm being really slow, and I'm being careful to make sure that I'm getting my needle into that stitch before I loosen it, and that I don't pull so hard that I start undoing the next stitch before I've caught it. You don't have to use circular needles while you're picking up these stitches. I tend to, just because then I can begin working with either end of the needle depending on what my pattern and what is called for. So I've got all of these stitches picked up and ready to again work another direction, or to graft somehow, or do some other finishing technique, do some kind of edging, whatever is applicable for this particular pattern. Okay, so I need 40 stitches and I have 39 here. So before I take out this last stitch, because I have this slip stitch edge, it's a little odd right here. I don't exactly want to pick that up, because that is, pick it up where it is in this particular case. In this particular case, I don't want to pick it up where it is, because that will not give me a clean stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up from here and have that be my last stitch. So now for this particular pattern, I have 40 stitches and I'm ready to graft them, because that's what's called for this stitch. And you can fudge it about on the other end if you'd rather. If you would rather have the stitch that you pick up be on this end, you could drop that extra and just pick up a stitch off the end and have that be your stitch. In fact, that's probably what I'm going to do. So I'll go back to this side, drop this one off, and then I'll have my other stitch here. So now I have 1, 2, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. 40 stitches. And I'm ready to do my grafting for this particular piece. Like I said, that finishes the provisional cast on. And now I've picked up the stitches and I can use these and work with these stitches in whatever way I need to. In this particular case, it will be Kitchenering them together, grafting them together with the other end, and that will be in our Kitchenering video. Thank you. I hope you found value in this tutorial. If you have, please consider a one-time payment via PayPal or a regular subscription via Patreon. The links are down below and they are on the screen. Again, thank you for joining me. See you next time.